Hello, I am Karen Jean-François.
And I'm Cecilia Oliveira.
And this is the Women in Data podcast.
Every other week, we bring you conversations with inspiring women who are shaping the world of data.
We dive into stories, explore challenges, and share insights and learning to help you navigate your own career in this exciting field.
And sometimes it's just the two of us, candidly chatting about our experience or topics we're curious about. Let's get straight to it. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Women in Data podcast. It's Cecilia here, and today's episode is for anyone who is curious about the many paths we got into data and how we're going to grow once you're in. So we often talk about working in data, but the truth is that can mean so many things. So when I was looking for my first position, I've interviewed at the same time for a data engineer, a data analyst, and a data science position. So I clearly had no clue. So I wish I actually had this conversation with Riya before, but having a clear idea of what you want or looking for really, or looking for it really helps with defining what you want to do with your data career. So today we're taking a step back and helping everyone figure it out. What data role is the right one for you? How do you break into it strategically, and what it takes to thrive long term? So before I get too excited about this, I'm going to ask Riya, who's a data and applied scientist at Microsoft, to introduce herself, please.
Hi, Cecilia. Really nice to meet you, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm really excited because I have made the same mistakes. I had to pave my own way. So if I can help, anyone in any way, I'll be grateful. So I work as a data and applied. My name is Riya Joshi. Yeah, let me start with that. I work as a data and applied scientist at Microsoft in their headquarters, USA. Before joining Microsoft, which has been like around 2.5 years now, in a role of data scientist, I was studying at University of Massachusetts Amherst. Like I did my master's from here, which was in computer science and with a major in AI. Before that, I was actually working as a data engineer in my home country back in India, and that too with Microsoft, fortunately. But that's where I got introduced to different roles in data science, and that's where my interest peaked. And I decided that okay, let me do a full-time master's degree because I wanted to anyway do a higher education. So I quit my job, applied for colleges, got in, unfortunately, I just got my way back into Microsoft again, but in this time in the role that I wanted.
Mm.
Apart from that, because I have been really fascinated with this field, so I also, in my free time, I've also been a speaker at various AI conferences. For example, Women in Data Science Conference, Pi Data Global, Pi Ladies. And I'm also a mentor in Women in Data Science. That's where I got to know that many people, many folks are still figuring it out. What are different roles and, how to get into them. So, yeah, hopefully I can address all those questions today with you.
So let's go straight into it. Sometimes it doesn't sound like it, but we do prepare those episodes. So I know that whilst we were preparing this, you decided that the best way to approach it is to put the data roles in 4 different buckets. So
Yeah.
do you wanna explain this a little bit for us?
Yeah, definitely. Because I feel all these data projects are a journey. And there are, different aspects of these journey that different people are skilled to handle. So I will try to, make it as simplified as possible and fill these on those buckets. But let me give you a disclaimer. All these roles, they can be called very differently in different companies. An analyst might still be developing models, in some companies, or a AI engineer might be doing full stack data science development.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody is trying to get to know more about the role, I would say go through the job description as well as, try to connect to some folks who are already working in that company in that particular role to know what the role constitutes. But
Yeah.
having said that, the general or the generic overview is as follows. For example, let's start with the first step, which is called the analysis or the analyst role. So their main aim is to extract insights from data and drive decisions. So broadly, very broadly, there can be two type of analysts, and they can be, used interchangeably again. One is maybe data analyst, whose main role can be to clean, analyze, and visualize data to answer some business questions, right? They also create reports, charts to present to business. Then can be business analyst, very related role, but here you are tied very specifically to a business. You're trying to answer very, very specific business questions. You might
Mm-hmm.
also be defining some KPIs. KPIs means key performance indicators that tells us whether the business is growing or not. For example, for maybe a website business, it can be churn rate. Churn rate is something if, for example, how many users stop using that particular website. So,
Right.
just not to try to drown people in jargons, but this is basically what they try to do, that they try to define a business objective and they work backwards to analyze how far or how close they are to that business objective. Then comes engineering roles. So, engineering roles, the main aim is to build infrastructure and maintain that infrastructure for all these data science models or these data science projects. Majorly, they can be categorized into two buckets. One is a data engineer, another is ML or AI engineer. Data engineer, majorly, his or her main job is to ensure that the data is accessible, reliable, and easily available to folks who are working on it. So they build a lot of big pipelines and they work on big scale. They handle big data and most of the times in real time. So yeah, so that's what the main job constitutes. Then comes
Mm-hmm.
ML AI engineer. Their main job is to deploy ML or AI solutions. So, whatever models that data scientists have built, they want to be deployed and to be accessible to audience and also in an optimized way. For example, users nowadays have become very, very impatient. They won't wait 5 seconds for, something for a page to load or for a model to give results. So that's why the inference needs to be optimized, as in, it shouldn't be delayed, things like that. Another aspect is to know if the model is, doing good or not. For example,
Mm-hmm.
one key specific problem with, AI or ML models is that they fail silently. They don't fail, like, for example, how a software engineering bug comes in, you know what the exact issue is. But with ML models, it's not the case. They were trained on some data, for example, 6 months back. But now things
Mm-hmm.
have changed. The data have changed. Human behavior have changed, who's interacting with the product. And that's why the model is not, behaving that well. And that is something very important aspect of an ML engineer to, figure out that
Yeah.
what is going on. This is called
I,
data.
I, I love the way that you've explained they're sneakily not working
Mhm.
anymore. That is
Yeah.
so true. All of a sudden, 6 months later, you look into
Yeah.
this doesn't seem quite right.
Yeah. And also very difficult that what gone wrong? It was fine.
It
But
was
yeah.
fine 6 months ago.
Yeah.
What's the problem? Yes.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And then comes the science roles, which are basically can be your data science or applied science. So their main aim is to answer the why of the things. They start with a hypothesis that okay, this might be happening, and they try to validate those hypotheses. Now, this
Mm-hmm.
they can do maybe by building some ML models, statistical models, using their historical data to do some predictive modeling on new and upcoming data. Or one important aspect is A B testing. So A B testing is, for example, you own an app and you're making some changes to your app, right? But you want to ensure that that doesn't lead for the users to go away from your app. So what you do
Mm-hmm.
is you give your original version of the app to some users and your new version of the app to some users and see what is the difference. Are people liking the new version or not? So this is called A B testing, that they
Uh-huh.
test two different versions on two groups and see if the changes work or not. So that's also
Yeah.
falls under the umbrella of data science. Applied science is very similar to data science. People use it interchangeably. It's just
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that if you're working on very specific or niche part of maybe data science, for example, NLP or Gen AI, they can sometimes be called applied scientists. Research scientist, however, is a bit different. So applied scientists use basically whatever is available and try to build applications on top of it, whatever models are available, whatever solutions are available. Whereas research scientists, they want to create something new, novel, it's maybe new methods, new methodologies, and they write papers about it. They do, basically the work is to do research and not majorly to build products. And a PhD is more than often required for a research scientist role. Then comes our PM roles, right? PMs are basically the bridge the gap. They try to bridge the gap between engineers or scientists and basically what is needed by the product development. So they define that these features are needed, these things are needed, and they try to communicate it with the science folks or the engineering folks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that's a very extensive. I wish I had all of that explanation when I started looking for a job, for sure. And
Same.
I think what is also important to understand here is that, you can go in as a ML engineer, a data engineer, but there will be some part of your job where you're also going to have, you're going to have to do a bit of data storytelling, which is typically
Definitely.
a analyst job. So, there's a lot of
Overlap. Yeah.
complement and I don't know, leakage between the
Yeah.
different
Yeah,
the different
definitely.
jobs.
And particularly, I feel data science and data analysts, they are like quite overlapping. A data scientist, I feel, has to be a good data analyst. If they don't understand the data, if they can't drive basic insights from data, it's not gonna work. And same, ML engineers, because ML engineers, their skills are so complementary with data science, they have to learn all these things, right? That it's many a times they overlap so much that an ML engineer might also be developing model, or a data scientist might also be, deploying models, because it's if it's a very big company with a very established data science orgs, they might have different roles. But if it's like a startup or somebody who's starting, new in the data science fields, more than often, same folks are doing all of these jobs. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think you touched the point there is that depending on the company, depending the size of the company, you will be doing all
Yeah.
of the data jobs,
All of them. Yeah,
and
exactly.
then in bigger structures, you will be merely doing that one job that you've been hired for. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I guess this is for all of us to discover at some point.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Now, going back to the different fields, I mean, we've talked about the different fields that you can get into and the different buckets, but I think that is what is really important here is what would be, the key skills for each of them fields, if it is technical or the soft skills, what do you think would be key here?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I'll answer it in the same, bucket wise, how I cater to the broader topics, broader roles. So for example, let's start with analysts. Analysts, because they are majorly, working on getting the insights, they need to have some sort of way of communicating with data. Now, this can be, if it's a relational database, this can be SQL. If it's a non-relational database, it can be some cousin of SQL, and it can, totally differ from company to company which big data processing language they are using, but some sort
Mhm.
of language communicating with data. People or folks or students, I think, should definitely start with SQL, because all other languages are some sort of, descendants of SQL. Other thing is, if it's smaller data or you have to do a quick analysis, knowing Excel or equivalent tools are always good. People have also started using a big data processing frameworks like Spark, or even,
Mhm.
Python, Pandas. So learning that is also not mandatory, I would say, but definitely good to have. It will, just maybe make you stand ahead of the curve. So this is like how you connect to data, technical, skills. Other is basically because visual, what you're trying to tell, the storytelling aspect of your data, it's very, very important. So you need to know, and easy to onboard is maybe some visualization tool like Power BI, Tableau, things like that.
Mhm.
So yeah, majorly from hard skills, I think these would be the one. But there are other skills that are equally important. I feel for a data analyst, that person needs to be a good storyteller. There can be a lot of insights or, analysis you can do, but what story you're telling it to your business stakeholders is very, very important. So converting that data to story telling is a skill that you learn, with time. It's not something that just happens. More and more projects you do, more and more presentations you do, you get to understand from that. For example, if you're in a company or an early analyst or something, take as many chances as possible to present your work and get feedback. That will really help you to know how well you're telling the story. Some people are naturally storytellers, some people have to work on it.
Yeah, I think it's also, like you said, put yourself out there, try it out, because
Yeah,
it's not you've learned and it's done. It's a
exactly.
process.
Exactly. It's not something you can easily master by, sitting on a computer and just doing it by yourself. It is something that you need other people to be involved in.
Absolutely.
Third aspect is basically domain knowledge, which I feel is very, very important. For example, if you're working in an insurance sector, you're handling a completely different ball game than if you're working maybe in other product, right? So it totally depends on what type of problem you're solving, and that domain knowledge comes with time, but that is very, very, very important. And yeah, so other one is engineering roles, which is data engineer or AI ML engineer. For that, you need to have, basic coding skills that are required for engineering roles. But if you're a data engineer, you need to know big data. You need to know how to communicate with your data, for example, SQL or maybe Spark or, any equivalent communication language, same as analysts sometimes have to know. But for data engineers, it's a mandatory thing. They also need to know how to create pipelines, but those are something, that different companies use different tools, so that can still be learned on. But the basic things of what is, how to process data at scale and how to communicate with data at scale is something data engineers need to know. For ML AI engineers, it's very similar that you need to know basic programming, basic coding. Apart from that, you have to know ML. You have to know different machine learning models, different AI models. You even have to know, the language, for example, either
Hmm.
PyTorch or TensorFlow, whatever, they might be communicating in. So, and Python, obviously. So
Hmm.
that is something very important for ML engineers. Data scientists have very similar, I would say, skill set. They need to have very similar skill set as ML AI engineers, but a little bit more, I would say. As in programming or coding is still optional, though not anymore, because nowadays people want you to know everything. But yeah,
Fair.
you have to have in-depth ML knowledge. And nowadays, because more and more teams are moving or trying Gen AI as well, so I would highly recommend to get yourself familiarized with Gen AI or NLP
Hmm.
or things like that in general. It's very
Yeah.
difficult to just stay in one pillar, you know.
Yeah. No, that sounds really good. And what do you think about having some kind of knowledge of the industry?
Mhm. Okay, so domain specific or industry specific knowledge is something that folks usually don't test that much on. For
Yeah,
example, if
sure.
it's a very niche field. Okay, for
Hmm.
example, they might want you to know, very simple example, how to, maybe if it's a data science interview or applied science interview, how to design a recommender system, okay, how Netflix does it, Spotify does it, things like that, but in a very generic way. If you're applying for a very insurance specific company, just have basic knowledge of how it works. But these type of domain knowledge you'll be able to get once you'll join the company, because those are very specifics. But yeah, if you're interviewing for something like this role, just have a basic knowledge of how that industry usually works. But once you are in the job, domain knowledge becomes very, very important.
Absolutely. I've transitioned from working in hospitality and now work with higher education. I
Mhm.
can tell you, I had no idea how higher education in the UK ever worked, and now I definitely do.
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
have to learn it. So
Have to learn it.
make sure you make yourself available or interested in that field. Because if you're
Exactly.
not interested in the field that your company is working on, it's not going to work
It's
out.
not gonna work out. Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, again, going back to that, are you interested in that company? I think this is perhaps one of the first questions you need to ask yourself, right? When you're looking for the right role for you. I'm also thinking, perhaps when I was looking for my first position, what was I mostly interested in? Was it more, I don't know, maybe coding and infrastructure and, building pipelines? I mean, I didn't even know what pipelines were, to be honest,
Mm.
at that time. But, or am I more interested in like insights and decision making? And I know that for me, and this is very specific to me, but I know that for me was more about proposing solutions to the business, more in the commercial aspect of it, because it's where I was coming from. So it's where I knew what I, you feel comfortable where, I was uncomfortable enough going into a different field that
Yeah.
was completely foreign to me. So I think there's like types of questions that we need to ask ourselves before we get into this.
Definitely, yeah. I totally agree with that. And that is very, very important that you mentioned, whether you enjoy building things like, coding things up, infrastructure that I'm not that interested in building models, but I want to, stay on the engineering side. I enjoy coding. I want to stay on engineering side, but get familiarized with, ML and work on some aspect of ML. Then maybe ML engineering or even data engineering is for you if you really enjoy your engineering aspect, but you also want to diversify a little bit more into the data field, then maybe some engineering role like ML engineering or data engineering might be good for you. But if you're somebody who's like, okay, I want to work with data, I don't want to go that much in depth or, know, familiarize myself with the math and the science, but I want to stay more on, answering questions, finding insights, telling a story, then definitely I think analysis is a very, very good role for you. You can, you can play out with the data. You can, tell a story. That's a very interesting thing. If you are like, no, I want to do, kinda everything, as in like I want to know the data and then I want to use that data to answer specific questions in the future, or maybe use that data to build something, some AI solution or some AI product, then definitely data science, applied science is for you. And now that sometimes more than often, especially for students, very difficult to know what will I enjoy, right? What do I want? The best way is experimenting with different
Hmm.
projects. Maybe take out different bootcamp courses and see what do you like. In bootcamp
Yeah.
courses, there is some project aspect. I would say start with multiple levels. First of all, do a basic level 101 course or 101
Hmm.
course for all of this, if you're not very sure, and see what it is, for yourself and how do you enjoy it. Secondly, if you're still confused that okay, I like data analyst also, maybe I want to be a data scientist also, then maybe do some sort of projects, data science projects start with analysis, right? So you can do the analysis bit of it, then you can do the data sciencey aspect of it and see what do you enjoy more. And if you're
Hmm.
like, no, I love coding and would like also to know, ML or data, then definitely, then engineering is, I think, the best combination of all. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
best way is maybe trying out different courses, building some projects, some pet projects or, capstone projects. And yes, if you can talk to people who are already in the industry, if you're not sure what different roles can constitute and what can I do, about it, taking mentorship is never bad. That is always going
Yeah.
to help you, that you should do regardless.
Hmm. I think that's a very good. There's a very good tip here. Is just try it out yourself. If you don't try it, you don't know. I mean, and
Exactly.
then at least you'll know. Well, I actually hated doing this. Oh,
Yeah.
actually, I loved it. I want to spend the rest of my life doing. Maybe not,
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
you understand what I mean. And then also finding someone to discuss it. I think exchange is so important.
Yeah.
We often are doing everything on our own in our little pod or or working remotely, and we forget to interact, and that is so important. And then testing your skills also in courses and bootcamps is, yeah, it's definitely a highlight. But
Yeah.
let's get back to getting the right experience. So how do we break into this data career? How do we build the right experience to get into it?
Hmm. Yeah. So, for example, let's start with folks who are either not in this field, okay, who are trying to make transitions or are students. I think first of all is if you want to enter into data field, there are some very good to knows and good to have skills which you should start working first. For example, maybe basic problem solving that is going to be asked if you want to move to any data engineer, ML engineer roles, or if you want to even be an applied or data scientist. People do ask that problem solving code. Now, this can be SQL, this can be your algorithm or data structure courses. So, have a good foundation of those. And these skills cannot be learned in a day. You cannot just read 10 pages book and get done with it. This is
Mm-hmm.
comes with practice. It's like mathematics, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
highly recommend people that build these transferable skills at least, so that those are very common across different roles. For example, software engineering and all, other technical roles. So build those. Apart from that, if you're targeting a data role, now, a data engineer's preparation might be very different than a applied scientist or an ML
Mm-hmm.
engineer preparation. So, have some sort of clarity there that if you really want to go through data engineering, then go into data processing, batch data processing, real time processing, how to build those pipelines. If you want to go into more ML side, then brush up your concepts on ML. If I recommend people now that okay, learn a little bit more about Gen AI as well, because it's gonna be a little bit more prominent and easier to onboard than the other niche fields and then how it was 2 years back. So those are some of the skills that I would definitely say, have those skills ready, as in that is the preparation part. Other part is learning through doing something, so
Yep.
definitely it also builds your resume if you have some sort of projects. It's difficult to convey that okay, I know these skills, and it's easier to say if you can show that okay, I have done
Mm-hmm.
this project, I have done this capstone, I have done this hackathon on this particular technology. So definitely, if you do not have any working experience on that particular technology, you want to enter into that field, definitely try to do and leverage some sort of capstone projects, hackathon
Mm-hmm.
projects. There are a lot of opportunities like these AI hackathons and things like that. Definitely participate in that if that is the type of field you want to get into and you're trying to build your resume.
Mm-hmm.
And that also covers our how to build your resume part in this. Just
Right.
like that, best way is first of all you need people need to interview you, then only you'll know you're good or bad, right? So for that, to be able to interview you, your resume need to be shortlisted. And for that, there are some things that you really have to do. First of all, your resume should be, if you're less than 7 to 10 years of work experience, do not have more than one page resume. Okay. Your
Absolutely.
resume should be crisp. It should be clear. Your A recruiter will have only 15 to 20 seconds to read your resume. It should be legible, right?
Nobody got time to read
Yeah,
5 pages of all of the things that you've
exactly.
done that are wonderful. No. Keep it to 2 pages, please,
Yeah.
maximum. Or one. As you said, if you're less than 10 years, keep it to
One.
one.
Yeah. Stick it to one. Yeah, exactly. And it should be crisp and clear and in a very specific star format. What is star format is for all your projects, you have to write it in a story way. In a story means not verbose. Story means star is an acronym which means situation, task, action, and result. Situation means what was the overall objective of the particular problem that you were solving or the project you were working on. Task is what part of that particular objective did you work on, right? It can be a big project and you have worked on one component of it. Explain that. And then is action. Basically, what did you do to solve that problem? For example, you were maybe trying to increase people to use your platform or something like that, and you build a model for it. That's something that you did. That's your action. Results is what did you achieve? What did you optimize for? Did you maybe increase the accuracy of that model? Now, earlier people were using 50%, now they're using 90%, things like that. You have to quote
Yeah.
numbers, results. That's right. And the other thing is it has to highlight what type of skills you already have or you have worked on. For example, when your resume goes through application, it goes through something called ATS, and that is basically shortlist your resume automatically based on the keywords that your resume has. So try to include those keywords. For example, if you have maybe build a model using something called BERT, right? You have to mention that so that NLP or things or courses like statistics or things like that. The things that you want to mention and that needs to be there in your resume.
Hmm.
Do not lie in your resume. Do not make up information.
Oh
Not
my
at
God,
all.
no.
Yeah, because that's gonna caught up to you very sooner or
Oh,
later.
people will find.
Yeah, yeah, but definitely have it crisp and clear, and that is one of the biggest problem also with the shortlisting candidate, that there's something on the resume which either they have might have forgotten or it was a lie. So
Hmm.
don't do that.
And what about interview preparation? How do you think one should get ready for it?
So first is be very thorough with your resume again. Whatever you have written maybe or two lines, for your project. But people are going to discuss that with you in details. And you should have that prepared. Like, for example, how I do it for all my projects, I have a separate, you can say, doc or something where I have mentioned everything in detail. What was the task, action, result, how do I do it? The story to refresh myself, whenever before an interview. So do that. Have a good story about your interviews. Oh, sorry, about your projects. Be very,
Hmm.
very thorough with the resume because that's a big put off if you have mentioned something and you do not know. Other thing
Oh
is,
yeah.
yeah. Other thing is whatever you have mentioned in your whatever role you're applying to, at least you should know all those basic skills. There can be very particular, there are preferred skills and they are good, good to have, and actual required skills. You should
Hmm.
at least know the required skills of the job that you're applying to. So that is very, very important. Practice, do mock interviews if you can, if you have people in the field, in your friend circle or whatever, a networking circle. If you don't have, there are a lot of free mock interview websites. You can leverage that, use that. And yeah, I think that'll be.
I think those are such good tips. But just for us to close up this episode, can you share like three one-liner tips for us to, if we forget everything of what we've discussed, what are the three things that people should take home after listening to this episode?
Definitely. First of all, it's okay to be confused or not know something. Okay, you're gonna figure it out. Just keep going in that journey. Everybody has been confused and everybody is trying to figure it out.
Hmm.
Second, have a good network or connections. Your LinkedIn is what is gonna speak for you. So have a good network, have a good connection, learn from them, talk to them.
Hmm.
Third, be smart with the process. If you are if you're a person who's applying, you're a student who's applying, leverage AI. Okay, leverage. There are a lot of AI tools that can help you prepare for interviews, that can help you
Hmm.
apply to jobs faster and better. Leverage that because things are changing. We are in the AI era. If you're a working professional, communicate more, communicate with your manager more, communicate, whatever you want, wherever you want your career to go, because nobody else is going to do it on your behalf.
Absolutely. You're your own best advocate. That's for sure.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, we started doing this for a few episodes now with Karen, and you've chosen 5 questions for us to do a quick fire of questions. So, what's the most unexpected lesson you've learned in your data career?
I feel the data career is one of the fastest evolving ones. Whatever I wanted, in like maybe a year back, my career plans have changed, evolved. For example, when I started, I just wanted to get into ML. Now I wanted to be very specific Gen AI engineer, things like that. So it's an
Uh huh.
ever evolving thing.
Absolutely. It's never stable, it's
Yeah.
always progressing.
Mhm.
So, what's the common myth about working in data that you would like to debunk?
That it's not all that glamorous. AI models are
No.
very nice and everything, but what impact you're creating to your business is utmost important and the ultimate
Hmm.
priority over building, fancy models.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's your favorite app at the moment? Because I
I
know that I don't know if how it is with you, but I know that I change every couple of months.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I would say it's like Microsoft 365 Copilot. It's kind of their a version of ChatGPT, and it's integrated with
Mhm.
everything, whatever product you use, Word or Outlook, or even their search engine.
And what's your favorite book or podcast or resource at the moment?
So when I commute to work, I try to listen something that is not related to AI because that's what I have been I hear all day. So I am really interested in history and world history. So I listen to a podcast called Conflicted. So that is something that's really interesting that talks about 20th century history and world in a very interesting and storytelling way.
I don't know that one. I'll look for it. Now, this is a question that comes back quite often, and I do like that question a lot.
Mhm.
If data was a superpower, what would be your superhero name?
It would be inferentia, which means drawing ordinary insights from convoluted data and using them to build AI solutions. This is the most, you can say, typical AI engineer answer I could have given. But yeah,
It feels data engineer, but glamorous to me. So
yeah, in a cute
fabulous.
outfit.
Exactly. Riya, thank you ever so much for your time. This was a lovely chat, and
Thank you, Cecilia.
I'm sure we'll hear from you soon.
Thank you, Cecilia. It was amazing connecting with you, and I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Women in Data podcast.
We will be back in a couple of weeks. Until then, we would be very grateful if you could leave us a rating or a review, as it helps us not only to make the podcast more visible, but also to enhance the content.
And if you don't want to miss the next episode, follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We're also on LinkedIn.
Don't forget to register to the Women in Data community. It's free. All you need to do is head to womenindata.co.uk.
Have a great day!